Hi, I'm Jerry Douglas with Catalina Yachts, and we're going to do a brief overview of where we are with the new Catalina 545. We're going to look at the deck plug first, then we're going to go over to hull number 1. Hull number 1 is actually the hull is completed. We're going to walk through the interior, so you'll have a pretty good feeling for all the features that are really going to make this boat special. First, we're looking at the transom. This does not have the fold-down gate on it yet. The gate will come to here. Fold down and make a flat platform even with the interior of the dinghy garage. We're tooling the dinghy garage so it can fit an Avon 310, which is our sample boat right over there. You can see it's fairly wide. It's a little over 8 feet wide, so you have to let the air out of the dink, but we'll have a compressor right here. We'll also be offering davits that'll mount here and retract. I think most people will carry the dink on davits most of the time, but if you're doing a passage and want to put the dink away, you'll be able to fit it inside that locker and then close it up. This whole locker floor is molded as a part of the deck so that any water that enters here will go right out the stern. There's no opportunity for any water through any aperture to get into the interior of the hull. The cockpit, the aft part of the cockpit sole is a separate piece. It's right here. We have half of one of the cockpit seats mocked up. The other one will go right here. It'll be symmetrical. They'll actually have lids on that go up to the same level as the deck to create a continuous seating platform all the way around the aft end of the cockpit. Have a hinge mechanism here. When the platform's down, there'll be a ladder in the platform itself, but there'll also be steps molded into the back side of the platform with a tow hold here, so be able to board the boat in case of an emergency with the platform up, which we think is an important safety feature. We're in the starboard aft portion of the cockpit. This boat is set up so that all the controls lead aft and accessible to the helmsman at either wheel. We've also left enough room in front of the pedestal so that a crew person can easily get to the secondary winches or the primary winches. Most of these boats will be equipped with electric winches, and we've created a place right here where either the helmsman or crewman can reach the control buttons for the electric winches. These are the secondaries. All the halyards for the secondaries and the main sheet lead aft under a cowling, which will start right about here and go all the way up forward to the mast. So all the halyards will be in a tunnel all the way from the control station to the mast. And that tunnel drains overboard. It'll be removable, so if you need to get at those lines, they'll be accessible. Bank of stoppers right there. This is the secondary. This is the primary. Foot block outboard, which gives us a nice clean run to the Genoa tracks that are outboard. The Genoa tracks are 12 feet long, so we can sheet inboard at about a 9.5 to 10 degree angle, sails up to about 160%. And there'll also be pad eyes on the stern quarters for the asymmetricals. Home station will have a pod right here, which we're going to build in-house. It's designed, we haven't mocked it up yet, which will have a room for a 12-inch plotter and engine controls, if the engine controls and engine instruments, if the engine instruments are not read through the plotter face. Each of these pedestals is symmetrical. This is a new design. There's a mock-up you'll see in a minute that's made by Edson for us. We'll have 21 inches. There'll be another seat right here. We'll show you the seat that's mocked up on the port side in a minute. These will have lids on them. These seats will hinge this way. On this side in the box, we'll have a place to store a fairly large 4-stroke outboard in a vertical position. So when you lift this seat up, you'll be able to swing the outboard aft on a bracket we're going to provide and mount it on the dink. So you hopefully you won't need a hoist. And the engine will always be stored in a place where it drains overboard. It'll be safe to carry gasoline on board because it'll be vented to the outside of the boat. Port side aft in the cockpit. This is the mock-up of one of the deck boxes. This will have a grill in it and a sink with a cutting board. This will hinge this way and can hinge outboards. You can operate them both from on the stern platform or inside the cockpit. Again, when they're closed, the cockpit seat will be flush right here. This lid will go out there, so this will be one continuous seating surface. Like all the 5 Series boats, we've elevated the helm position so helmsman seated can easily see forward all the way to the stem fitting. We've got angled panels here outboard, so it's a good foot brace, and we'll have angled panels inboard for the helmsman on both sides of the boat. Here will be propane lockers. On the opposite side will be a matching locker, but that can be line and fender storage, or deck gear, but they're going to be fairly big deck lockers. Right here, inboard of the secondaries and primaries will be a line bin, so all the halyards and the self-tacking jib sheet can be stored down below deck. Now we're looking forward in the cockpit, and really from the primary winches forward, this is all passenger space. We'll call this the passive cockpit, and after the primary is the active cockpit for the boat operators. A couple of neat things about this part of the cockpit. Again, we'll have our covered line tunnels going all the way forward. Very tall seat backs, and they're designed so they can accommodate seat back cushions that will come up and roll over the back of the coaming. 16-inch tall seat backs. The cockpit seats themselves are 7 feet long, so they'll be plenty comfortable for sleeping or lounging. The cockpit table, similar to what we did on the 425. On the starboard side, there'll be a flip-out panel that makes that a very nice and secure lounge that'll have some place to brace yourself on both sides. This will be a refrigerator, similar to the 425, a little bigger, but same concept. We'll offer both varnished teak and fiberglass cockpit table tops and leaves. Moving forward in the cockpit, this is L-shaped, and so that we could take full advantage of the opportunity for someone to sit here at the table, we made this little extension flip up. So that will only be flipped up when you really need to access this area right here. What we did is molded in the forward part of the cockpit sole a locker that will accommodate a 6-man Switlik life raft, which is the largest life raft canister of the available life rafts, and it'll all live below deck right there. So if you need to access it, there'll be a handle right here, a gas spring assist, and you'll be able to pull the life raft canister out. Beauty of putting it right here is it puts the weight forward. It's always accessible. It's not out in the weather. It'll be covered by the Dodger. And that's right here below my feet, the removable panel. But when you don't need to do that, these seat extensions can be down and still give you more than 24-inch passage forward. This hatch and the hatch opposite look the same, but they have very different functions. This hatch is right above a galley counter, and there's a dumbwaiter in the galley that elevates a tray up to this level. So when it's lunchtime, you'll be able to open up and pull the serving tray out, put on the cockpit table, and afterward just put things back. Way safer than carrying things up and down the companionway. On the starboard side, there'll be another hatch, but this is an escape hatch and a ventilation hatch for the aft cabin and the head passageway. The companionway hatch will slide forward from this point, obviously, and right in this there'll be a machine piece of starboard that will allow us to have a one-piece polycarbonate, also known as Lexan, hatch in the companionway. So it'll be just a one-piece hatch that'll go down to this level. We've made enough threshold height so we exceed the CE requirement for down-floating angles. It was an important safety factor. As with all Catalinas, we do these full-size mock-ups so we can really get the ergonomics correct, and it gets a sense of how the boat really feels. We did this on the 425. It's molded this little recess, so it makes stepping over the coaming into the cockpit kind of a very natural, very secure feeling. We also have a solid stainless steel handrail right here as part of the stern rail. So when you exit the cockpit, you'll have something solid to grab. Something I think is important is the cockpit seat and the weather deck are exactly the same angle, same level rather. So when you transfer from one to the other, don't have that feeling of stepping over and down or stepping out and up. It's a very natural way to transition from one space to the other where they're both on the same level. Here you see the raised areas for the Genoa tracks. Again there, as I mentioned, they give us nice inboard sheeting angles. Should be able to put some real performance sails on this boat. Here we have molded in mounts for the Dodger windscreen, which will be continuous on these line cover tunnels that will mount right here. They'll also be part of the sea hood that travels all the way across the boat, so there won't be any lines passing through these, so it'll really be a watertight windscreen on the Dodger. Notice how wide the weather decks are. These weather decks, especially here, are in excess of 24 inches wide. The decks are actually quite a bit wider than this area you see, and that right here is an 1.25 inch trough that runs the length of the boat, then our bulwark, which you'll see, which is 3.5 inches tall and quite beefy. So it's really going to feel secure in this boat. The purpose of the trough, and there are drain spots in this trough, so that it's quite deep, it'll catch any water that runs aboard and on the weather deck, and it won't run down the hull. So we're eliminating the black streaks. This drain trough will connect to a couple of drains in the deck flange, the hull flange itself, and then we'll have through hulls at the water line where the water connects it. So there won't be any water sheeting over the side of the boat to keep the hull nice and clean. This will be the forward end of our line trough. The lines will exit from the foot blocks at the base of the mast, or turning blocks rather, and come outboard and onto a line organizer similar to this, and then run underneath the tunnel cover all the way back to the cockpit, which is about a little over 20 feet. See how wide the weather deck's here. Really secure feeling going forward. I know it's kind of bucking a trend when so many modern boats, especially the European boats, tend to be making the narrow decks fairly narrow to accommodate a bigger house structure. But we really didn't need to do that because we've got the accommodation of the boat to feel airy enough without cheating the weather decks. I just think it makes the boat feel so much more secure going forward. Mounted on the cabin side will be recessed tempered glass windows with integral opening ports. So we're not using plastic on these ports. They'll be tempered glass, and they'll be segmented. So each segment's about 3 feet long. There'll be 4 on each side. So we'll have a little over 12-foot long windows on each side of the boat, so we get lots of natural light below. On deck, we're doing another butterfly style hatch, similar to the one we did on the 425, which gets you great ventilation either direction, no matter how the boat is moored or tied up at the dock. This is a self-tacking jib track. This boat will have a self-tacking jib standard as well as a option for overlapping head sails. I think there's going to be plenty of horsepower in the self-tacking jib, and that our J dimension is approximately 20 feet. So it's a very big fore-triangle to put a lot of power in the self-tacking jib. Just forward of the self-tacking jib is a recess for the foredeck lounge mattress, and we've made this area perfectly flat with it drains forward, so it'll feel very secure and the mattress won't want to blow away. It'll be kind of recessed into the foredeck. This will be a flush hatch into the forward cabin. Of course, this mattress, like the 425, will flip up over itself, so at night if you want to open the hatch for low ventilation, you'll be able to just flip it from inside the boat. Moving forward, this boat has 2 watertight bulkheads in it. One of them is right here, just after this flush hatch, and this is going to be a Lumar hatch with dogs in it, which will be able to open up. It'll be hinged on the port side, and we'll have a stainless ladder in there because it's quite deep. I can just about stand up in that locker. The forward end will be chain. The windlass mounts on this non-skid surface up here. We've cut away part of the deck because it's part of the collar, and it'll come right up to here, so this will be a flush surface. The windlass will be right there. We're looking at using a Maxwell 3500 chain and rope bollard windlass, so we'll have plenty of power for even big anchors. We've molded in the bowsprit on this boat. It's not a separate appendage, it's attached. It's a molded integral part of the deck, so it really looks sleek from the outside, and it's immensely strong and leak proof. We don't have a lot of bolts or glue attachments on the outside of the boat. Inside this forward locker, forward of the collision bulkhead, the watertight collision bulkhead, this locker will have a stainless steel ladder. We'll also have some shelves on each side for storing the cruising spinnaker or fenders, extra lines, but it's a very deep space. Then the forward end will have another half partition, short bulkhead, and that'll be divided in 2, fore and aft. One side for the chain primary rode, the port side for the, or the starboard side rather, for the secondary rope and chain rode for the secondary anchor, which will store below. From this perspective, you really get a sense of the size of this boat. Nice wide weather decks, a fairly low cabin structure. Should be a very easy boat to get around. As you've all noticed, this boat is now called the 545. That's because the actual length of the hull is 53 feet 6 inches. With the integral bowsprit, it's approaching 56 feet long. So it's a big 54-footer. Well, here we are in the main cabin of the 425. What you're looking at is a mock-up of the interior. When we finish all these rough plywood pieces, we'll take them out and use these as models to make real pieces of teak and maple hardwood. I'll start here. This is an important part of this boat, and this is something unique to the 545 because of the scale of this boat with a over 15-foot beam. All the primary bulkheads in the boat, and there are 3 transverse full bulkheads and 2 transverse partial bulkheads and 2 longitudinal bulkheads that support the cockpit sole and stiffen the boat longitudinally around the engine. These are all made of 1-inch honeycomb material called carbon core, fiberglassed on both sides. It's very, very stiff and impervious to water absorption or rot of any kind. These are glassed all the way around the perimeter to the main mast support structure that goes across the boat, and all the way up and around all the way to the deck. So the boat is completely ring framed all the way around and glassed in place, and that's the case with all 3 of these bulkheads. The forwardmost bulkhead is the collision bulkhead, and as I point out on the deck, that's a little over 6 feet from the bow, and again it's taped and ring framed all the way around the hull, leaving space in the floor for our strike zone or our collision absorbing impact area. This is what we always call the main bulkhead or B bulkhead, and this will have an aperture in it and then a little vestibule right here and a space to walk into the forward cabin. This cabin we tried to maximize the sense of space in this cabin, so you read all 15 feet of the beam of the boat. The very corners of these side panels are right up against the hull. I have settees on both sides. This is a smaller settee obviously, and this is the larger one. Both of these are 7 feet long. The settee on the starboard side will pull out to make a double berth. The settee on the port side will be fixed, but it can be used as a single because it's plenty long enough for that. We're still working on a couple different table designs. This is one mock-up. We're not quite settled if it'll go transversely or longitudinally at this point, or if it'll be a quad fold. We're going to play with a couple different options. So we've done 3 mock-ups so far, and this is the 3rd one, but we're not quite settled on that. All the tankage is subsole. We have a little over about 220 gallons of water, about 160 to 180 gallons of fuel. So the boat's going to have some legs. I think with the way we're constructing this boat, it's going to be a proper go-anywhere ocean cruising boat. Let's turn around and look at the cabin from the other direction. We'll talk about the galley. This is an overview of the galley. You can see in the aft end of the galley there's a passageway into the port aft cabin. We've got just lots of storage in this boat, and I think it's a proper seagoing galley. We're able to, because of the beam of the boat, we're able to put the sinks inboard, so the sinks will drain and not take water no matter how the boat heels. In this portion of the galley, we have over 5 feet of refrigeration space and 2 large drawers, which we've ducked the galley here so you'll be able to stand here, open the drawers, and pull things out no matter how the boat heels. They're set up so that one drawer can be a freezer, one can be a fridge, both can be freezers, both can be a fridge. You have complete flexibility in terms of how you use those. On this side, we're going to build a box in, and this will have a freezer unit similar to the one we're doing on the 425. We'll have at least 4 inches of insulation all the way around and a heavily insulated top, so it'll really make ice and hold ice well. Lots of overhead storage space, range hood, recirculating, microwave. There'll be a pull-out pantry right here, similar to the one on the 425, because that's the best way to use these deep, narrow spaces. This side will be a pantry. This will be a top-loading pantry. This will be storage. This end of the galley will be either an ice maker or a wine cooler at the owner's option. We thought this is a great place for the ice maker because we've got the bar kind of set up on that side of the boat. On the inboard side of the galley, there's a cabinet for the microwave, and I mentioned we looked at the deck. There's a provision for a dumbwaiter, or that's what we're calling it, and this is a very rough mock-up of it, but the concept is we'll have a drawer similar to this with inboard handles. It'll go on that shelf, and there'll be a fiddle here to hold it in place. And then the guys have cut a little slot here so we can actually kind of make it work, and you can see the concept. I'm not going to go up to within a little bit higher, just a few inches, and the hatch that you saw on the deck description is right there. So you'll be able to lift in. This will be at about that level, and you'll be able to pull it out. Serve lunch or cocktails, set it back in there, and then lower this back down. And easily unload it from inside the galley. Much safer idea than carrying food and glassware up and down companionway ladder. On the starboard side, we have what I think is a very generous nav station. These flush panels outboard will contain the electrical panel and any repeaters, but they're all going to be behind flush covers. You want to maintain this very long plane, which I think makes the cabin look quite a bit bigger. It'll all be one uniform finish. See, inside these side panels are 14-inch by 32-inch clear panels, or they'll be tinted panels. There'll be hull windows, and those happen in 6 places throughout the boat. 2 in the main cabin, 2 in the forward cabin, and 1 in each aft cabin. We've just put some paper there and some light so it gets the sense that they're going to be light sources in the boat. These will have screens behind them that'll slide, so you'll be able to open it or close it. We're going to do the 2 in the main cabin translucent, and the 4 in the sleeping cabins will be opaque, so you'll be able to black out the sleeping cabins. But back to the nav station. This nav station is shaped the way it is so we can accommodate a TV right here. And the TV will be a panel that'll lift up, and there'll be an electric ram that lifts the TV up, and then you'll be able to rotate the TV. We'll look at that in a minute. Leaving room here for a cabinet, which will have barware, glasses, some bottle rack down at the bottom, that kind of thing. So between this surface and this surface, you'll have a pretty nice serving counter. We elected not to put a settee here so that this could be used as a serving buffet. And we kind of like the idea that, you know, because we have about a 5-inch difference between the 2 heights, it's just the right level for a table height for a serving buffet here, but it's proper counter height in the galley. This cabinet and the lifting mechanism are designed for a 42-inch TV. So there'll be a rocker switch that'll lift the TV to this position, and then there'll also be a switch that'll let you rotate the TV, or it can be done manually. We haven't quite figured out if it's going to happen manually or electrically yet for the rotation. But it should make a pretty nice TV lounge. We wanted to locate this so you could see it from most places in the cabin and the galley if you chose to, so that works out pretty well. I think that having the TV completely disappear will leave the main bulkheads free for some nice artwork. All the way around the perimeter of the main cabin will be this light trough, which will have lights in the top and lights in the bottom, so you get a good sense of light. And I think reading this continuous band all the way around the cabin will really enhance a sense of space. We also, right here, we have those 2 large butterfly hatches on the deck, so this will just be flooded with light during the day. This is a rough mock-up of the companionway ladder. It'll look more like this. The guys like to put these little sketches I make up on the bulkhead so they can kind of visualize what we're trying to do, aside from the nice prints at John A. This is the companionway stairs. Each of the stairs will have our signature step tread shape with these angled surfaces so you can walk up and down them when the boat's heeled, even though not all the steps are built that way, but you have to visualize that. This is the threshold height outside. This shape represents the interior of the hull liner. The deck with the deck liner will be about 2 inches thick, so the companionway is actually, you don't take this literally, that's not the companionway aperture, it's really more like this. And then of course the Lexander polycarbonate hatch slides up from there. For engine access, this whole thing will lift up on a electric ram, because we have lots of headroom in this boat. It can go way up there. And then this lower portion will be attached to it, because the engine is right below. But when this is up, you'll have very good access to the engine. This is a 110 horsepower Yanmar 4J110. The service side of the engine, of course, is the starboard side. The only thing on the port side you need to get to is the starter motor, and we'll have an access panel below the galley sink for access to the starter motor. But engine access is, I think, pretty good. We're in the port aft stateroom of the 545, and this is set up to be sort of a play on what we did in the 425. This has a pretty generous double berth right here, but it can be made even bigger by flipping this panel over, or this panel will be fixable in this position so it can be used as storage and things won't fly out. What we like about this is it opens this up, and then we can have large doors right here for access to the generator, water heater, inverter, battery charger, and a bulkhead space to put a component water maker on the opposite bulkhead. In this portion of the port aft cabin, we've left this area open, so you have a little bit of walk around space in here. You can see headroom's pretty good in here. And we'll have a door here which will open this way, and inside will be our famous filter locker. So we'll have cooling water filters for the generator, for the primary engine, fuel filters for both of those there. Again, so everything's accessible in a clean locker with a light in it. On the outboard side, we have a bureau, and these drawers go back about this far, so that when you open these up, hanging space will go down behind the drawers. So we can really make good use of this space, yet keep it feeling fairly open. What we're looking at is the entryway to the starboard aft cabin. And there's a little vestibule here, so you step down, then open the door. Again, it's a 5-inch step, but you're not opening a door and stepping down as you go through the door. You do step down first, then the door, which I think ergonomically is kind of an important thing, especially when the boat's moving around. We have a door here into the head, and this is makes this the common head, and there's another door into this head from the starboard aft cabin. So you have private entrance from the starboard aft cabin into that head. Neat feature here is above us is the escape hatch. There'd be a couple of footholds on this side, but that hatch will be translucent, and we'll have a translucent panel above the aft head, so you get some natural light into the aft head from above and some natural light into the aft cabin from above, and it still functions as an escape hatch. Both the fore and aft head compartments have very generous showers with seats. I mean, they're full-size showers. And there'll be hooks in there so you can use it as a wet locker hanger foul weather gear. They're good size heads, and they accommodate household size bowls. We're looking at the starboard aft cabin, and this is the convertible cabin. I think of this as sort of the VIP or suite number 2. Plenty of floor space, private access to the head. And the neat feature about this are the convertible berths. This could be 2 singles or a very generous double. We'll have a rocker switch on the bulkhead, and there will be an electric ram that moves the inboard berth over. And I will do that. And now the berths are pulled together to make a large single. Both berths are the same sides, and they make a nice double berth together. These dowels you see, ignore them, were just put in so we could test the spaces, but they will not be there in the real piece. We're looking at the aft bulkhead in this cabin, and in the port cabin is the continuous watertight bulkhead that goes across the stern of the boat. This bulkhead is forward of the rudder post, which is a very vulnerable appendage, as you know, and if the rudder post is damaged, there's no way water would get into the boat. So you have these chambers at both ends of the boat that create watertight compartments. So it's very unlikely water would ever make its way into the main hull of the boat from either the forward cabin if you were to hit a container, or the aft cabin if you were to lose the rudder and damage the rudder post. Great safety features. This is also will be made out of a honeycomb composite material and fiberglass on both sides. Okay, now we'll take a look at the forward or owner's cabin in the 545. Again, a little vestibule, small step down, a door right here that opens into the cabin. Right here will be a locker that will open up to give you access to all the electric connections and electronics connections for the mast. Now we're in the owner's cabin, and this is one of a couple of different configurations available. Portion of the owner's cabin could be cordoned off to make another sleeping cabin, a den, a media room, a laundry, whatever you choose to make it. In this case, we're doing this as an owner's suite with a lounge there for the lounge seat. This is also convertible to a bunk, a sea bunk. By removing this cushion, it makes it long enough to, if you put your feet through, to have a sea berth there. This will be a locker with Shelves. This will be a very deep hanging locker going down to the top of the AC vents. You can see it's quite deep, and it's a proper wardrobe. It's about 24 inches deep. We'll have drawers here, storage lockers up there, and a full bank of storage lockers going all the way around the cabin above the windows, the hull ports. Again, we'll have sliding screens here. These will be opaque because it's a sleeping cabin. That aperture forward is a bookshelf. That's deep enough to put books in there or whatever you choose to store in there, and there'll be reading lights on both sides. And the valance will have a light that'll put a wash of light down over the bulkhead. The berth is a full, proper queen-size berth. A standard queen-size mattress will fit on this berth. We're going to supply it with a queen-size innerspring mattress, and of course I'll have our traditional berth head lifter electric ram that'll lift the head of the berth. On the starboard side, we have a little dressing table with a pull-out seat. And we'll offer a little settee here as well, and either a table or a writing desk in this cabin. I think this is a very spacious owner's cabin that we've got very good reaction to so far. So I think this will be a popular feature. From the feedback we've had so far from potential owners and those that have seen this boat, this owner's cabin is going to be a very popular feature, and that it's pretty extraordinary for a 54-foot boat to have an owner's suite with this much space and these kind of amenities. Generous owner's head with a full-size household bowl, pedestal sink, storage below, and a very generous sized stall shower. Well, there's an overview of where we are in the 545. At this point, we have all the tanks designed and the grids in place. We've got our fiberglass cabin saw in place. This is a reel hull and bulkheads. This will be number one. We'll start taking this furniture apart in a few days and building a piece of furniture out of teak and other hardwoods. And we've got the hull laminated. We've already started hull number 2. We put the grid in number 2, so we're rolling. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.